swoop in?
I am here.
Great. Would you mind switching your time? Can you give your talk now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So we're going to come back to Lauren. First, we're going to hear from Susannah, who's from New Mexico State University, adjunct faculty in landscape architecture. Susannah Abbey was born in Tucson, Arizona, and has lived in the southwestern US for most of her life. She teaches landscape architecture at the University of New Mexico and practices design in and around Albuquerque. Susannah writes about design justice, art, and agroecology. Her book, Seeds and Their People, is forthcoming from UNM Press in spring 2026. I will make sure to put Susannah's email and information about the book in the chat. And Susannah, I believe you're all set to share your screen and go for it. Welcome.
Um, Thank you. I'm not seeing the option when I go to share, I'm not seeing my own desk. Oh, wait. Yes, I am. There it is. Hold on. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we see your
Okay.
desktop.
Okay. How about, here we go.
There we go.
Sorry, I guess I wasn't as ready as I thought.
That's
Um,
okay. You're taken on unknowingly. Go for it.
All right. Hello. Um, As you just heard, I'm a landscape architect and teacher at the University of New Mexico. My research focuses on cultural landscapes, urban design, and social justice. But recently, I had the opportunity to write a book about seed saving in the US Southwest. And it got me thinking about the importance of agroecology and the seed commons as an integral part of landscape justice. While I was writing the book, I began working part-time at Tesuque Pueblo Farm to learn about seed saving from Emigdio Bayonne, and I've been helping out in their seed sanctuary ever since, and I'll talk a little bit about that during this presentation. Okay. Um, so I'm calling this the long view, um, because focusing on selecting and organizing seeds for distribution, and I want to talk about how that actually requires us to take a long view, not only because doing this might be a multi-year process, but also because creating a great seed collection asks us to think well into the past and the future. I will talk about certain kinds of knowledge that are important when you are selecting seeds, forming a collection of value to your region and community. And these are knowing place, selecting appropriate seeds, cultivating genetically diverse seeds, storing and managing seeds, and then finish up with a few more notes about Longview curation. Seeds are one piece in a puzzle that includes environmental ecology, climate, socio-political issues such as access to water and land, and connecting people with the land. Sharing information and acknowledging our relationships to each other through our family histories and cultural foodways can be a great catalyst for establishing a strong community. Depending on where you are, you may have patrons with plenty of land, but not much knowledge of their neighbors or even their own family histories around food. On the other hand, you might encounter people who care deeply about specific plants that they remember their grandparents growing, but maybe they live in apartments and have to limit themselves to container gardens. And these are all part of a regional knowledge and building a seed library that works for a broad base of people. Knowledge of place is the basis of ecological understanding, and ecological understanding is fundamental to starting a regionally appropriate seed collection. So I'm going to, in this section, just briefly point you to some helpful sources of information. And I did gear this toward Arizona. So for anyone who's outside of the region, I think some of these resources will be available to you. Um, Maybe not all. I apologize for that. You can define your region in a few different ways. The EPA defines ecoregions as areas where ecosystems are generally similar. This basically means that the rock, the water chemistry, and the mesoclimate are similar, and where over time specific kinds of plants and animals have come to co-evolve. Arizona has 7 level 3 ecoregions, Each one is a little different with their own combination of soils and climate, but they also share characteristics. There's also the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone map, which was updated in 2023 in response to climate change. A lot of times you'll find information on growing specific kinds of plants on the seed packet, or if you're looking up information on how to grow a certain plant, it'll give you a range of hardiness zones where that plant might be better suited. So the map can help you narrow down your region a little more by temperature rather than soils or native biomes. The limiting factor for this kind of delineation is the average annual extreme low temperature, which often occurs outside or at the edges of the growing season, and which you can mitigate by starting plants indoors or covering them up at night. In my experience, it is harder to protect plants from high temperatures than low ones. Here's another way to look at region. This is a map devised by Gary Paul Nabhan in 1985. He originally called it Arido America, now he calls it Arid America. Nabhan is an ethnobotanist who has spent his career studying traditional foodways and plants domesticated in the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts, and assessing the value of these plants for future agricultural crops based on their nutrition, ecological characteristics, and agronomics, or protocols of care. Within Arid America, there are many different ecoregions, but they share characteristics. They tend to experience less rainfall, less snowfall, and more pronounced temperature fluctuations than the rest of North America, and they often share significant plant biomes. They also have a shared history of cultural and material exchange with Mesoamerica, as well as a history of Spanish and Anglo colonization, which affected the types of plants that became dominant in our food and medicine production and our ornamental gardens. Geology is another big factor of a region because soil forms from a combination of decomposed rock, organic matter, air, and water. For instance, if you have alkaline parent rock, you will have alkaline soils. And in this place, it might be hard to grow plants that need highly acidic conditions, such as azaleas and blueberries. Soil is a complex layered system that supports plant and microbial growth. On the left is a basic soil composition chart, but even within a region, it will differ from one garden to the next. So most likely your growers will want to test their soil and add amendments to remedy any macro or micronutrient deficiency. On the right is a USDA soil classification chart. This helps visualize the different particle sizes you might have in your soil. Sand has the largest particle size and silt the smallest. If your soil is too silty, there might not be enough voids for oxygen, and roots love oxygen. Too much sand and your soil won't hold water. Too much clay and you might not get good drainage. So the best soils comprise all three and rest near the middle of the chart. The principal climate variables that concern planting are temperature and precipitation. In Arizona and New Mexico, our precipitation has declined over the last 50 years, especially with regard to the winter snowpack, which is critical for getting water into our streams and rivers and recharging our groundwater. Among the traditional Hopi, where annual precipitation is between 8 and 12 inches per year, growers have noticed a decline in available moisture. At a seed-saving workshop I attended in 2022, one Hopi farmer declared that he has to plant at different times in the spring to account for changing rain patterns. Even for farmers who deploy active irrigation strategies such as communal acequia systems or groundwater pumping, new weather patterns caused by climate change have decreased available water resources. Oops. The second climate variable is heat. Heat affects plants at the biochemical level, initiating enzyme activity and increasing biochemical reactions in the leaves and stems up to a thermal optimum, that maximum temperature above which these processes begin to decline. It also affects the life cycles of birds, mammals, insects, and it affects bacteria and molds that can damage plants. Heat increases evaporation and evapotranspiration, which is basically how much moisture is lost through a plant's leaves. It has led to a new phenomenon called hot drought. paleoclimatologists who have studied climate over 24,000 years published, not the paleoclimatologists, they're not 24,000 years old. That was a poorly written sentence. They published a paper that found that in the last 150 years, the rate and magnitude of warming surpassed anything that had come before. In Arizona, the average air temperature has increased 2 degrees since 1970. An important local scale climate factor is the urban heat island effect, which is primarily caused by the concrete and asphalt materials that comprise our cities. Temperatures in a city can be 10 to 15 degrees warmer than surrounding areas. So, if you are in an urban area, microclimate will determine what you can grow and how to care for it during the hottest and coldest times. So, how do we decide what seeds are adapted to our regional conditions, are easy for new gardeners to grow, and have historical and cultural relevance to members of your community? First, we can look backward toward what has been grown here for thousands of years, and we can also look sideways at what other gardeners and farmers are successfully growing today. The fact is that people have been cultivating plants for food, medicine, and utility here in arid America for at least 13,000 years, likely much longer. Some of these are native plants that people encouraged by burning out or clearing out space for them, or for which they selected certain traits that they liked and domesticated. Many food plants native to this area, which were cultivated and even domesticated here, such as Sonoran tepary bean, panic grass, and chiltepine, and wild plants such as cacti, yucca, serviceberry, and sumac. These are plants that people still grow, harvest, and eat, or use medicinally, ceremonially, or for utility, and many of these plants are commercially available. Communities have been bringing seeds and introducing domesticated seed-bearing plants up from Mesoamerica and South America for thousands of years. Even though corn, beans, and squash were first domesticated farther south, people have grown them in northern climates for so long that they have adapted over time. Amaranth, chia, tobacco, chilies, and squashes have been the mainstay of many North American diets, and sunflowers were actually domesticated in the eastern US and migrated west. Here's some images of just a few of the hundreds of crops that Spanish missionaries brought to North America in the 16th century and introduced to Puebloan communities along Grande. The first is a muskmelon or a cantaloupe, and the second is a safflower. The dried flowers are edible and they're said to approximate the taste of saffron. And in fact, its name is Corrales. Corrales is the area where it was grown, azafrán, which is Spanish for saffron. The photo on the right is a Navajo peach tree. This is from a specific genetic lineage of peaches that were introduced by the Spanish and have been grown by the Zuni, Hopi, and Navajo peoples for almost 500 years. European, African, Middle Eastern, and Asian gardeners have come to the desert, bringing their own food traditions and growing their own kinds of plants, such as collards, beets, okra, date palms, and wheat. Some of these plants, as it turns out, really like the climate and soil here. Even if they're not native or traditional crops, they're still worth including in a seed collection, especially if they are meaningful to your community members. We know that a lot of genetic diversity has been lost in big commercial agriculture, and that is why small-scale farming and seed saving and sharing is so important. Plant researchers are looking at ways crop wild relatives can restore the gene pool that has been lost from decades of growing just a few hybrids. I'm going to talk a little bit about plant genetics as a way of illustrating how seed savers can preserve genetic diversity in their own gardens and how plants from other places can adapt to hot, dry conditions. Usually, plant adaptation happens slowly over multiple generations, but human selection can encourage regional adaptations on a shorter timeline. My friend Jeanette Hartman, who began the Seed Broadcast Art Project that you might be familiar with, also has a farm in Anton Chico, New Mexico, and she runs trials at her farm every year. She plants a new variety of chard, for instance, or Asian cucumber, as pictured here, and the ones that survive and that she likes the taste of or are suitable for taking to market will be allowed to flower and go to seed. Don Tipping of Siskiyou Seed in Oregon calls this the Darwinian method of growing. He says, quote, "I'll literally seed cucumbers with a walk-behind seeder and then let the cucumber beetles annihilate them, and the ones that survive make seed. It was a little rough at first," he says, "but I've been doing this now for a dozen years, and we have cucumber beetle resistance in the variety." So plants adapt in place to the soils and climate and also the agronomic approaches used to grow them. A row of cucumbers grown covered to protect them from beetles will adapt to be grown best as covered cucumbers and will not have or not necessarily have beetle resistance. Plants with abundance of water will adapt to need more water, and alternately, watering less will select for plants that have more drought tolerance. Joseph Lofthouse of northern Utah does a similar trick with what he calls adaptation gardening. Lofthouse preserves genetic diversity by planting a lot of seeds of the same species and allowing them to cross-pollinate. This creates land races, which are a little like heirloom varieties, but are genetically diverse and less stable. They're also adapted to a specific place, unlike heirlooms. This instability of land races also makes them more adaptable and can make the crop as a whole more resilient. You pick out the specimens you like best, the ones that taste the best, or have less insect damage, or need less water, and you save the seeds from those. Then you plant them again the following year. This can be an ongoing process of testing from one season to the next. Adaptation can also occur in as little as 2 generations, as illustrated by the Osmani cabbage experiment. Despite the fact that Florida produces more vegetables than any other state in the US outside of California, farmers buy most seeds from outside the southeastern region, areas with different mesoclimates and ecosystem interactions. The researchers point out that small and mid-sized growers there had expressed an interest in locally adapted seed. So they ordered seeds of a 28-day heirloom cabbage from Italy and doled them out to 3 organic farms around Gainesville. The seeds came from open pollinated plants. In the first season, researchers assessed germination rates, measured seedling height after 1 month to assess vigor, and measured leaf and root mass. The farmers collected seeds from these plants and replanted them the following year. In the second season, the researchers performed the same measurements in comparison to fresh seed from the original supplier. The seeds of the locally grown plants germinated 50% faster, more uniformly, and at a slightly higher rate than the Italian grown seeds. At 4 weeks, the second generation cabbages had grown bigger and had larger crowns than their first generation cousins. The Italian seeds amazingly produced about half as much leaf and root biomass. The researchers concede that the Italian seeds might have been older and that storage conditions might not have been optimal. But they do conclude that at the end of the growth period, Florida-sourced seed plants produced 46% higher marketable yield compared with the plants grown from the Italian seeds. And this suggests that plants in their second season might have inherited some beneficial adaptation from their parents. In some farming traditions, farmers select specific ears of corn out of each harvest and give them special blessings. These ears are marked by certain bright red kernels or yellow kernels streaked with cream red or yellow. They're left in their husks and placed in the center or the 4 corners of maize storage pits and bins with the expectation that the blessings would spread to the rest of the kernels. In the late spring, guardian kernels are planted out with the other corn. In the 1940s, geneticist Barbara McClintock studied the genetics of maize and discovered that the speckled and variegated kernels, which are characteristic of corn guardians, were indeed special. McClintock discovered that certain DNA sequences called transposons in maize could jump from one place in the genome to another in response to environmental stressors. McClintock described the process as the genome responding to, quote, unanticipated challenges in a discernible but initially unforeseen manner. This caused mutations in which chromosomes broke apart and rearranged themselves. McClintock's revelation broke the paradigm that genes were fixed in place and could only be passed from parent offspring in a predictable linear way, and led to the further discovery in the 1980s that transposons are ubiquitous and abundant. In fact, there's a particular family of jumping genes called rider transposons, present in tomatoes, rapeseed, beets, and quinoa, and possibly others, that are triggered by drought stress and could potentially help plants cope with climate change. McClintock also discovered that gene expression could be switched on and off in response to environmental factors and during stages of cell development, which is the subject of epigenetics. Epigenetic changes are different than genetic mutations. Whereas mutations can cause a change in the DNA sequence of a plant, epigenetic responses create a change in the function of a gene, turning existing genes on or off without changing the whole sequence. There's growing evidence now that a plant that responds to an environmental trigger can pass on its adaptive response to subsequent generations through seed formation. In fact, plants can form counteradaptive responses to predators, molds, and fungal pathogens, as well as soil salinity, extreme temperatures, heavy metals, and drought. This is done in scientific research through the process of priming, which means artificially bringing a plant in contact with a stressor, such as a high temperature. We don't really know for sure how long the adaptation can persist, but I did speak to a plant scientist at Michigan State who says she thinks it might be multiple generations. Now I'm going to address storage for viability. I'll show you images of the National Seed Bank, some individual farmer seed banks, and I'll talk a little bit about how we keep seeds at Tsuke Seed Sanctuary. Seeds are alive, and successful seed storage techniques are all about keeping them viable. There are a few different kinds of seeds: orthodox, recalcitrant, and intermediate. Orthodox seeds are the ones seed librarians are most likely to handle. They're the ones that dry down on the parent plant as they mature. For seed keepers, it means that we can safely dry them to 12% or less moisture content and store them at freezing temperatures. Recalcitrant seeds must stay moist in order to retain their viability. They cannot be frozen, as the stored water in them would form ice crystals and kill the seed. The intermediate seeds fall somewhere on the continuum in between. At the National Seed Storage Library in Fort Collins, orthodox seeds live in vacuum-sealed bags at minus 18 degrees Celsius. And unorthodox seeds and tree cuttings live in liquid nitrogen vats at temperatures to minus 130 degrees Celsius. Here's an image of the seed cooler at the Institute of Applied Ecology in Santa Fe. They run the Southwest Seed Partnership. These are the seeds of native wild plants, which they will send out for use in restoration projects. And here is a similar kind of facility at Borderlands Restoration Network down in Patagonia, Arizona. Here are 3 different seed collections. Brett Baker, a farmer I interviewed for the book, stored his seeds in an adobe outbuilding on his property, and the thick adobe walls helped keep it fairly cool even in the summer. The middle photo is from Anton Chico, Jeanette Hartman's seed storage. Right now it's just a shed, but she's working on getting something better. But you can see there's a lot of use of recycled glass jars and recycled plastic buckets. Basically, these people will use whatever they have at hand. They're not too picky. On the right is a photo of the seed sanctuary at Tsuke Pueblo Farm. You can see we use glass jars and also cloth bags for the corn and chilies. We keep our seed collection downstairs under the main building in a cellar, and the earth keeps the room at a fairly even temperature, and there's a fan that keeps the air dry. We do have some seeds that we collected and received from last season, but we also have some that date from the 1990s and possibly from the 1980s. The important thing is to keep them cool and dry and protect them as much as possible from insects. Insects will lay eggs in the seeds of corn, squash, chili, tomato, or other plants, and then the eggs will hatch in storage. The baby bugs will eat all your seeds. The best way to avoid this is by freezing your seeds to around 20 degrees for about 5 days and by checking and cleaning them regularly. And even commercially grown seed is susceptible to insects. Even if your seed collection is kept impeccably with regular cleanings and germination tests, over time, seed viability tends to diminish. The exact length of time depends on the plant species, sometimes on the individual seed. At Tsuke Farm, I've performed germination tests on 30-year-old bean varieties that demonstrated 100% viability. And I've also tested 5-year-old squash seeds whose germination rates were less than 10%. A jar of Diné watermelon seed harvested in 1990 remained partially viable until around 2017. But seeds can also last a ridiculously long time out of cold storage. In one paper I read, 2 botanists tested the viability of 40 species of seed extracted from the bricks of 18th and 19th century adobe buildings in California and northern Mexico. 7 of those species, all between 143 and 200 years old, proved viable. The oldest seeds ever known to germinate, as far as I know, are from a 2,000-year-old date palm found on Masada, an archaeological site near the Dead Sea. The species is poetically called Phoenix dactylifera and had been domesticated for 3,000 years before the seeds in question formed. So at Tsuke, we use, as you can see, the paper towel method of germ testing. We favor sort of more low-tech systems there. Most seed libraries won't have the resources and staff to keep seeds viable for years and years. However, if you do want to start a personal seed collection or a community seed bank, you will want to acquaint yourself with how to clean and test seeds. At Tsuke, we theoretically clean and test every year, but obviously it depends on time, and we haven't really managed to do it that often. So this is how we manage our inventory. It's basically just an Excel spreadsheet. We keep track of the species, variety, the year it was harvested, where it was grown, the collection weight, and germination rate. A seed library data system will probably look a little different. You'll probably want information on how many packets you have, how many are going out or coming in each week. But still, occasionally testing older seeds and keeping track of how many germinate would not be a bad idea, along with keeping information from borrowers and lenders about specific accessions, where they were grown, and their unique stories. Okay, just a few strategies for new seed librarians. So first of all, find local sources and partners. One of the most important challenges is finding seeds that have been grown in or near your region. For people in Arizona, there are a couple more options, such as Native Seed Search or the Great American Seed Up. The Great American Seed Up is a project out of Phoenix that offers bulk seeds that are climate adapted. Each fall, they host a big sale where growers can buy seeds in bulk and get more information about where they were grown. But it's also
Oh, okay.
it's also possible to order them
Wow.
online. Here are some photos from the Native Seed Search campus in Tucson. They buy seeds from farmers in southern Arizona and New Mexico and around the Four Corners area, and they also grow their own seeds in their little farm. And sometimes you can find seeds from national companies that have been locally produced. So for instance, I know at Tsuke, we sell a lot of beans and corn to Baker Creek for distribution. Sometimes you can happen upon a local seed company like Space Dog Farms in Albuquerque or Ramona Farms, which is an old farm in Sacaton, Arizona. So also, I think it's a really good idea to allow people to bring seeds back. I know there are issues around germination rates and hybrids and things like that, but I think it really encourages more active investment in your seed library. Espanola Seed Library, pictured here, encourages seed donations because they know they will get locally adapted varieties back. This library is run by Tiwa Women United, and there are a lot of Puebloan farmers in the area who value certain types of corn, beans, and squash that have been grown by other indigenous farmers. For the Puebloans, seeds are relatives and must be treated with respect. In order to take seeds from Espanola Valley, you fill out the seed caregiver sign up, committing to honor the people who have stewarded the seeds for generations, as well as the seed themselves. And you promise never, ever to sell the seeds. To bring them back, there's another form where you put down critical information that will help the next borrower, such as variety, seed year, location grown, and notes or stories that go along with the seed. You can also try growing your own seeds for the library. Espanola Healing Food Oasis is a garden project of Tewa Women United. It's just next door to the library. It's a community effort where people come from all over and volunteer to help grow things, but also the community is free to just take fruit and vegetables for their own use. There's no fence, no gate, it's not locked. And they also harvest seeds from this garden to give away in the library. The Community Seed Exchange in Sebastopol, California has started their own seed garden on a patch of unused ground next to a church. They established the garden because they said they were not able to get truly local seed from Northern California and Sonoma County. The garden is a little less than a quarter acre. They have a core group of 6 to 8 people who come to a 2-hour workday every week, plus one extra workday a month. And they offer classes and workshops as well as seed library trainings. The Seed Library Network, okay, getting into information sharing, which I think is another critical piece. The Seed Library Network started in the Bay Area, but has an online presence that includes seed librarians from all over the world. They recently completed a mapping project where you can see other locations near to you and a group network site for sharing information. They also have a project called One Seed, One Community, where they hand out seeds of the same variety to many different growers and ask them all to grow them out and return some of the seeds. The program is important because it increases the number of seed savers, but also in many home gardens, space is too limited to maintain the genetic diversity of seed varieties. So by encouraging gardeners to grow and save the same seed, they can help build genetic resilience and increase biodiversity. As the participants share seeds through local seed libraries, the collaborative effort strengthens local food systems and promotes sustainable agriculture. It also allows for the adaptation of seeds to local growing conditions. Native Seed Search does something similar with their partner farmer and partner gardener programs. The Seed Library Network also offers tons of resources for seed librarians. They have photos, ideas for how to present and catalog seeds. They even have an auto-generated seed wrapper. So just go to their website and scroll down until you see this window. And here is the map. So last year, instead of doing a conference, they did a huge survey which they sent out to all the seed libraries they knew of and asked people for information and then their location. This is available on their website. You just scroll down to find the link. The more you engage people, the easier your job will eventually be. Here in Albuquerque, the seed librarians host volunteer sessions packaging seeds. The Albuquerque Public Library does not take seed returns, but they do host a seed swap where people can bring their homegrown seed in. This allows people to meet other growers and share best practices and also the stories of the particular varieties they have grown. You can also teach people how to clean and store seeds properly so that if anyone wants to begin saving a seed line from something they got at the library, they'll have a pretty good chance of success. Your library can host events on seed saving or horticulture. And these photos are from Seed School 101, which was sponsored by University of New Mexico's Land Arts program. What's great about in-person events is that you as a seed librarian can develop relationships with members of your community, and you can also foster relationships between the members of your community. Another reason for hosting these in-person events goes back to looking sideways, learning what seeds people want. People who are new to an area might have cultural attachments to foods from their countries of origin, or they might remember what their grandparents grew in their gardens and would like to honor their heritage by growing similar varieties. If you get people talking and sharing seeds, you're opening the door for cross-cultural communication. Seeds are a part of our common heritage, and if we can appreciate each other's seed stories and treat the seeds themselves as precious beings that literally keep us alive, we can find and restore our connections to each other and to the earth. Thank you.
Awesome.
Are
Thank
there
you so much for
questions?
that. All right, I'm